Benny the Butcher is back with new music not too long after his last release, but just like the Griselda way with their music releases, he is back very, very quickly with more. This is a follow-up EP to the 2019 EP, The Plugs I Met. This is clearly a sequel, a direct sequel to that EP. And we are getting a bit more of the typical type of stuff that I think you would expect from Benny at this point. Now, Burden of Proof, for anyone that doesn't follow this channel closely, if you do, you'll already know this, but if you don't, was actually one of my favourite albums of 2020, easily up there with one of my favourite rap albums of 2020, quite easily as well. I think what Hit Boy brought with the production, what he brought with the production on that album there was something slightly different to what we've come to know with Benny the Butcher's type of rapping style. And not only just Benny, but it was a different kind of produced album compared to anyone on the Griselda label. They've always been very grimy, very kind of like murky, downtrodden, street gangster rap artists, and yet Burden of Proof took us in a slightly different direction, and I think it paid off massively. This time though, we don't have Hit Boy, we do have Harry Fraud instead, which is fine. I don't necessarily think there is something totally missing here on this EP, but I think this time around we're just getting a collection of tracks that I think, if you're a Benny the Butcher fan, you're probably going to listen to these and think, yeah, they're good Benny songs, but I think for me, they're just pretty familiar, and I don't necessarily think you're getting anything on this EP that we haven't already gotten before. Even some of the themes feel familiar to what we've seen Griselda rappers rap about up until this point, and Benny himself, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not trying to say it's exactly the same and he's not giving us anything new at all, because he's doing his thing. But I just guess, for me, I'm just not really totally blown away by what we're getting here. Now, the first few tracks I think are really good. When Tony Met Sosa has a fantastic instrumental. It's so lavish and expensive and just reminds me of like some early 2000s like jazz inspired luxury rap type stuff. Maybe you'd get this from someone like Jay-Z. I don't know, not exactly a direct line can be drawn between these two artists with this track, but I think Jay-Z would probably rap over this. Even someone later in the game as well, like Rick Ross, I think would maybe give you this kind of instrumental, and he sounds great on this track. It's a really great way to open up the EP. It pretty much sets the tone. As soon as you hear this track, you know what you're going to get with the rest of them. Overall, I think is really good as well. The chorus on this one is really, really damn catchy. I think it's really impressive how Benny is giving us more of this kind of accessible type stuff, especially since Burden of Proof, which was easily more accessible than most of the things on the Griselda label, I think. And he's just carrying that on. I mean, the instrumentals don't directly link on from Burden of Proof, but I still think he's bringing some really great choruses across this whole thing, not particularly just this song, but I think on most of these tracks actually. Saying that though, we do get Plug Talk right after this, and I don't necessarily think this one has got a particularly good hook. It's fine, I just think it's a bit repetitive, doesn't really go anywhere. It's definitely one of the weaker tracks here, I think. But obviously it doesn't really line up with what I just said. I did just say that the choruses across this thing are really good, but this is a bit of an anomaly, I think. I don't really get that much from this one. We do have the typical type of raps from Benny on this, which is what I said before, not necessarily getting anything we haven't really gotten before. I think Live By It. Well, actually, Live By It's an interesting one, because I think the message is pretty impressive on this one. I like the way that he repeats that same line of living by it. If you live by it, you got to die by it type thing. So it's like you can't just give up halfway. If you're going to actually stick to this sort of lifestyle, then that's how you're going to go. So while it's familiar, I think he does bring this one to life with the way he tells it, I think, and the way he words himself. But even still, a lot of the general lyrics, like if you go specifically into the verses, It's quite standard stuff for Benny and this style of music. Pretty similar story with Longevity, I think. Again, not really blown away by the bars that Benny's putting out there. And then you've got Survivor's Remorse, which is an interesting track in terms of the lyrical theme, but there's still something a bit familiar with this as well. Like, I'm sure we heard a Conway track like this not too long ago. We've had tracks from other rappers in this style. So I think what you've got to do if you're going to make a track like this is sort of put your own spin on it and maybe just add like an emotional twist, like something really, really gut punching in the lyrics or in the way you're rapping that sells the emotion. And I think Benny on this track is kind of just rapping how he usually would anyway, so I'm not exactly getting a huge amount of differentiation considering the topic that he's rapping about. Not a bad song by any means, it's a good song. I just think there was an opportunity missed to really sell the emotion with this one. I think he really could have brought it through and given us a really, really beautiful track with the idea of, you know, having survivor's remorse, but he doesn't really quite land it, I don't think. Talking Back, another great example of how he's refining the choruses and really bringing in some really catchy tracks here with the choruses specifically. You can tell he's really sitting down and just putting in a lot of effort in making these choruses really memorable and really sticky. There's a verse from Fat Joe on this one. I swear to God he's just saying anything. I swear there's really not much linking his lines together. There's some pretty good lines in there. Well, they're fine, I guess. But yeah, it does kind of just sound like he's just making anything rhyme. The closing track as well, pretty solid way to close out this EP. You know, kind of like demanding thanks from people on this track sort of thing. He titles the track Thanksgiving, and he's sort of just saying like, you know, where's my respect? You know, I deserve the respect, where is it? So yeah, I think with this EP, what you could fall into the trap of is saying, well, it's not progression from his album. And in a way, I do think that's true, but obviously we do have a different producer handling these beats, so you can't exactly expect, you know, a complete progression from Burden of Proof onto this, because the only way you'd really be able to do that, I think, is if Hit Boy was all over this EP as well, but he's not. So of course, it's really just showing that Benny can rap over various different kinds of beats. I think really he can do this kind of like grittier, street type stuff, but then also give us the catchier tracks, the more pop rap tracks even, you could call, on Burden of Proof. I just think for Benny's talent and Benny's standards, these are fine tracks. Not some of my favourites of his, but they're pretty good. And I think if I was going to go back to any of them, it would definitely be the opening track and Overall, and maybe even Talking Back as well. I think that is a good track as well on this EP. So yeah, solid overall. As I've said before, I don't score EPs, so there's no score to be given at the end of this, but I like it overall. I think it's pretty good. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. I haven't really seen many people talk about this. It's almost like it's either been forgotten about or people just haven't got onto it yet. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments though. Definitely an approval from me. So thank you for watching this review. Do have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tell me what I should review next as well. If there's any new releases you want to point me in the direction of, that would be great. That's it. Yeah. Goodbye.